Congress leaving the Capitol without funding the Department of Homeland Security ahead of their deadline. I'm Nathaniel Reed in Washington. Coming up, how long could a partial government shutdown last?
This is Today As It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Stephanie Liebergen, guiding you through our timeline of the day's most important news. From journalist Don Lemon appearing in court over his coverage of a Minnesota church protest to the New Mexico land commissioner calling for an investigation into Zorro Ranch, a large piece of property previously used by Jeffrey Epstein. But first, we started the morning with a look at the back and forth over funding for the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security is on track to shut down overnight tonight after the Senate failed to pass a deal to fund DHS on Thursday. Our Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed joining me now live from our D.C. newsroom. So Nate, the House and the Senate are gone. The deadline is midnight. So where exactly do negotiations stand this morning?
Well, presumably, Stephanie, they're ongoing, but the reality is both sides are not seeing eye to eye on the best path forward on funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which, again, so much larger than just what's being negotiated right now. They're negotiating funding for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, rather negotiating guardrails to try and put limits on what ICE is able to do. Those roving patrols you've seen all across the country, Democrats are looking to stop those and put in place other critical reforms. The reality is there's a whole lot of other departments and agencies under DHS that are going to fall by the wayside in this partial government shutdown, which at this point cannot be stopped. Congress left for the recess, week-long recess last night. Ultimately, there's no funding for the Department of Homeland Security, and so we will be in a shutdown possibly for a week or longer. Democrats saying they could call their members back to Washington if an agreement is reached. At the same time, urging the Trump administration to use funds they already got as part of the Republican mega bill last year to keep the Department of Homeland Security functioning and to keep Americans who work there paid. Take a listen.
If there's a deal, I expect we will be called back, and that's fine.
What's your message to air travelers then, or people who rely on FEMA for disaster assistance if they are in a partial shutdown and workers are furloughed and Americans can't access those critical services?
There's absolutely no reason for workers to be furloughed because there's more than enough money to keep those organizations operating for the next couple of weeks.
And look, the irony here, Steph, is that the Department of Homeland Security has plenty of funding for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. As part of that Republican mega bill, they got tens of billions of dollars through 2029 to spend on immigration enforcement. So even though we're in a partial shutdown, ICE and CBP, they're not largely affected. They have their own pot of money that runs through 2029.
Well, with this shutdown basically inevitable now, Nate, we're hearing, ICE and CBP unlikely to be impacted. So what agencies will be impacted with this shutdown once it happens overnight?
TSA, FEMA, the Coast Guard, Secret Service, those are all agencies that fall under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security. We could see workers furloughed, going without pay for an indiscriminate amount of time. To be clear, the Senate leaving on a recess, the House too, for at least a week. Again, they're saying they could call their members back if there's an agreement here. The White House saying that they're willing to entertain good faith negotiations. But Steph, a lot of questions about whether those negotiations are happening and furthermore, whether a deal can be reached. Democrats have largely called what the White House has offered inadequate. Not getting into details, though, Senate Minority Leader Schumer repeatedly telling reporters he will not negotiate in public. There's a whole lot of details about these negotiations we simply do not know.
But one thing we do know, Nate, is that the longer any kind of shutdown of a federal agency lasts, the bigger the impact will be, not only for those employees who may be working without pay, but for Americans who might rely on those agencies, like TSA if you're planning to travel in the near future, or like FEMA if there's a natural disaster. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, as always, thank you very much. Now let's take a quick look at some of the other major headlines from today. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is calling for the U.S. and Europe to repair their damaged relationship. Merz opened the Munich Security Conference today by acknowledging a rift in transatlantic trust over the past year. He had argued that NATO membership benefits America as well. The annual gathering brings together European officials with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is the highest-ranking American official in attendance, after House Speaker Mike Johnson canceled the House delegation amid the current DHS funding battle. The United States is sending the world's largest aircraft carrier to the Middle East. The USS Gerald R. Ford's deployment comes as President Trump is trying to pressure Iran into a nuclear deal. The move puts 2 carriers and their warships in the region, with the USS Abraham Lincoln already in the Arabian Sea. Arab Gulf nations are warning that any attack, though, could spiral into a regional conflict in an area that is still reeling from the Israel-Hamas war.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Dragon, and Godspeed Crew 12.
A new crew is on their way to the International Space Station today to replace astronauts who returned to Earth after NASA's first ever medical evacuation. SpaceX launched 4 astronauts from the US, France, and Russia, and they're beginning an 8 to 9 month mission. The crew should arrive tomorrow, filling the vacancies left by their evacuated colleagues and bringing the station back to a full staff. It was the first time in 65 years of human spaceflight that NASA cut a mission short for medical reasons, but they have not revealed the ill astronaut's identity or the health issue. Coming up on Today As It Happened.
Very proud of you. Somebody said, I was just watching a little news coming down. They said, oh, it's amazing he can find the time in his busy schedule. Believe me, you're the time. My schedule's not the time. Although we do have a couple of interesting things happen.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. Let's continue our walkthrough of the day's top stories.
Moments ago, President Trump delivering remarks to service members at Fort Bragg. First Lady Melania Trump was with them. The president talking about new investments in the military and also the capture of ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull joins us now live from the North Lawn. And Haley, you were watching this closely. What did he have to say?
Yeah, Del, the president, as you mentioned, addressing troops at Fort Bragg a short time ago, in which he touted the changes to the military under his second administration, in particular touting what he views as military strength. And he made a few examples in these remarks. In particular, he pointed to the operation in Venezuela to arrest Nicolas Maduro. At the same time, while he called it a quote, an amazing night, and praised the members involved in that. We also heard him earlier in the day praise the U.S.-Venezuela relationship with its interim administration. The president also told reporters he would visit Venezuela, but did not offer any further details or timelines. He also pointed to the dealings in Iran, Operation Midnight Hammer. That was the United States strikes against military targets in the spring of last year. But it comes as there are heightened tensions once more with the U.S. and Iran, with talks having taken place between Iranian and U.S. officials in efforts of reaching a deal, while at the same time, the president has retained his options, his military options. Just this week, the president appearing to direct a second U.S. aircraft carrier to be on standby to deploy. Earlier today, the president telling reporters that move, quote, in case we don't make a deal, we'll need it. Del?
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull for us live on the North Lawn. Haley, thank you very much. Meanwhile, the president's approval rating dipping to a new low, a new Associated Press NORC poll showing that only 36% of the voters actually support the commander-in-chief. Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty joins us now. And Raf, you've been looking at the numbers. You've been looking behind the numbers, in fact. What are you learning?
Yeah, well, Del, it's interesting. We never take a look at just one poll and make any sweeping conclusions, but this is part of a much larger trend, a trend that we've really seen throughout the first year of Donald Trump's presidency, where his disapproval rating has been steadily ticking up. And so what that means for the AP poll, well, that went into the standing of the New York Times. It's a polling aggregate showing he's at 40% now. That is the lowest of his presidency. But it was really interesting to dig in to some of the numbers. And this is the one that I want to get to, because if you look at, we're talking about healthcare here. Let's take a step back though. Month to month in that AP poll, he's down 4% in February from where he was in January. Immigration, he was level, no dip there, even though what we saw in Minnesota. The economy, his approval actually went up a couple points. So I think it really comes down to what we were just had on the screen. Healthcare, I think that it's something here in Washington.
Right.
It got so much attention towards the end of last year, but you look at his approval now, or this is the question was, is this a major source of stress in your life? And it's up to 48%. Of course, we were talking about those Obamacare subsidies that are now out the window, but it also goes to people who get insurance through their employers have also seen, as we began the open enrollment that went into effect this year, the numbers creep up as well. So healthcare feels really expensive. And for whatever reason, the economy went up a couple points, and that's within the margin of error of this poll, so that'll kind of go up and down. I don't think there's any sweeping conclusions we can draw there. But as important as some of these other issues that we're talking about are, ICE, immigration, what Haley was just talking about, foreign affairs, it's so important for us when we're talking about the politics of this to think about what are people really caring about right now. And right now, healthcare might not be in the headlines as much, but it is on the minds of many Americans.
We spend an awful lot of time talking about Democrats and Republicans. Those numbers seem to be relatively fixed. What about independents, though? They're the ones that are doing all the moving.
Yeah, and they are the kind of the most sort of reflective of where the overall electorate is, and it has been interesting. We were just talking about immigration. That is an area where the president has lost a significant amount of support. I think in the AP poll, it was back in March, it was 37%. Now it's down to just 23%. Obviously, all of this coming with the ICE actions in major U.S. cities, the deportation of people without due process, deporting individuals who will come out in reports being that they didn't have criminal records, not the type of violent offenders that the administration so often says that it is targeting. And it's interesting, it's not just independents. There was also some polling that shows that among young men, Trump's standing has fallen quite precipitously. And remember, Donald Trump is not on the ballot this year. And Republicans in 2018, the midterms during his first term in office, had a lot of problems, okay? You can still do pretty good if you have the MAGA base that loves Trump, that's going to show up. But we have seen time and time again that they do not, in fact, go to the polls reliably when Donald Trump's own name is not on the ballot. And so that is why so many Republicans are worried about what this fall could hold. Yeah,
the younger voting numbers are the ones that might cause Republicans to have the most heartburn.
Yeah, and it comes to, this is traditionally a group that went heavily Democratic. Donald Trump, to his credit, in 2024, whether it was doing podcasts appealing to that so-called brosphere, whatever it was called, this idea of young men that were listening to Joe Rogan and all these other influential podcasters, he made inroads with them in a way that cut into Kamala Harris's margins. That is a low propensity voter right there, though. And are they going to vote in the midterms, especially if we've seen Donald Trump also isn't exactly always super enthused about campaigning for people other than himself. So it's hard. Getting them to turn out again is going to be a real challenge.
Scripps News Political Director Andrew Rafferty. Raph, as always, thank you.
Thanks.
Straight ahead on Today As It Happened.
We found that there was a very disturbing allegation that came out that could be linked potentially to state land. Because I am the manager of that land, I'm the elected steward of that land, what occurs there and what the land is used for is of utmost interest and importance to us at the State Land Office.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's return to our briefing of today's top stories.
New allegations that are surfacing about possible crimes on state-owned land near Jeffrey Epstein's former home in New Mexico. Known as Zorro Ranch, it might be Epstein's most mysterious property. Files released by the Justice Department show survivors were brought to that ranch, which was frequently used by friends and businesses alike. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York City. She's been combing through all of these documents. And Alex, New Mexico's land commissioner is getting involved. What ignited this push?
Well, Del, it is about a 2019 email that was sent to a conservative radio show host that was supposedly from a former Epstein staffer on Zorro Ranch, which was his private property. According to this staffer in the email, which was anonymous and encrypted, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are involved in this potential crime where he says that 2 foreign girls died of strangulation during, quote, rough fetish sex, and they were buried on the hills of Zorro outside on the orders of Jeffrey and Madam G. Again, this email was from 2019, but it came out in that latest batch of files, which pushed this commissioner to get involved and ask the state's DOJ to investigate. Why write this letter?
We found that there was a very disturbing allegation that came out that could be linked potentially to state land. Because I am the manager of that land, I'm the elected steward of that land, what occurs there and what the land is used for is of utmost interest and importance to us at the State Land Office. To our knowledge, there has not been any investigation of the state land or the Zorro Ranch.
Do you have any way of knowing what this land was used for?
From our reading of the historic documents, what it seems like is like the state land was used almost as a buffer, a shield, to hide what activity was occurring on the ranch.
To insulate the ranch.
Absolutely, insulate visibility to what was occurring there.
Are you concerned that this public land might actually be a potential crime scene here? I mean, is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely. If state land was used for criminal activity, that is definitely something New Mexicans need to know. Those are answers that victims and survivors need to have.
What does your authority look like over these lands?
So I have the authority, obviously, to cancel the leases and make sure that any party associated with Jeffrey Epstein was removed from the property. Unfortunately, we do not have law enforcement capability here at the State Land Office. So we are looking to partner with other agencies that do have that capacity to be able to investigate the land.
Do you think there are interested partners out there for you in law enforcement?
Yeah, so we have already started to receive some phone calls from folks who are willing to partner with us.
Is there capability in New Mexico to get the technology that helps you look for these unmarked graves?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's ground penetrating radar. There are what they call cadaver dogs that basically are able to detect whether or not there are burials in the area, yes.
How big is this land when we're talking about it? I mean, is this something that is doable for an investigation?
It is fairly large. It is fairly large. And we don't have, the only clue we have so far, and again, this goes back to the substantiation of the allegation, it is a phrase that basically says the hills behind Zorro Ranch. Well, the hills behind Zorro Ranch is state land. And so we are looking to probably target and spotlight that particular area to begin with.
You're hoping that the New Mexico DOJ or the federal government is going to get involved, and if not, you plan to work with some state partners to do so.
Correct.
So you feel like this is going to be an investigation one way or another?
I will keep pushing until it is. That's essentially what I'm saying. I think we have all seen that the reason that we are where we are with this case is that people did not raise the alarm earlier. People did not push earlier, did not ask questions. So now is the time to do that. It is kind of late, but I think it's better now than not ever.
And Del, the state's commissioner, she told me that she reached out to the state's attorney general in 2019, but nothing was ever investigated. Zorro Ranch has also never been searched. And so there are a lot of questions surrounding what went on in New Mexico. And that ranch was sold in 2023 to a private owner. Again, this is state land that we're talking about surrounding that private land. Jeffrey Epstein's lease was also canceled in 2019, not because he died, not because of his crimes, but actually because he didn't follow through on his agreement to use the land for agriculture, and because he put Ghislaine Maxwell on the lease, and they called that a misrepresentation.
Yeah, based on an email, it looks like Madam G might be able to provide some of those answers. I'm assuming that is Ghislaine Maxwell. Alex, there are a lot of files out there. There's a lot of damning information, but there's also a lot of misinformation that is occurring online. How do you sort out fact from fiction?
Well, that's what we're trying to do here. It's really difficult to go through all of these files which have no context behind them. They are not in order. They're not grouped in any sort of way for us to really be able to paint a picture coherently. And so it makes it really difficult when you look at the way these files have been disseminated. By the way, there's no context given to the redactions, even though that's legally required. And so you have emails that we are looking at, obviously. There are photos and videos, but there are also things like tip lines and information coming out of the tip lines. We have to remember in those instances, those are unverified tips. So some of these really salacious pieces of information are not necessarily corroborated pieces of information. I mean, there are some stories floating around right now about cannibalism. Those have not proven to be true. In fact, that is a QAnon conspiracy theory. There's been conspiracy theories related to drinking the blood of children, eating children, related to the Democratic Party and related to anti-Semitism. That is an ancient anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that has been going on for centuries. And so we have to remember that not every single thing in these documents is to be taken as gospel, and that is why we are trying to sort through everything and really bring you the factual pieces of information and the pieces of information that link some of these men to survivors correctly.
This is Today As It Happened. Stay with us. Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest story. So let's pick up right where we left off.
The numbers are in concerning President Trump's tariffs. Yes, they did add revenue, but the problem is you're the ones that are paying for it. So says the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the average U.S. household paying about $1,000 more in taxes last year. That, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation, and they say it's also expected to rise this year to $1,300. NBA star Chris Paul hanging up his high tops. The point guard played 21 seasons in the league, likely to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. CP3 ranks second most in assists with 12,552. Paul was a four-time All-NBA first-team selection. He also won 2 gold medals with Team USA, but that NBA title has always been elusive. Former CNN anchor Don Lemon pleading not guilty to charges stemming from that protest in Minnesota. He was facing conspiracy to deprive religious freedom rights and a violation of what is called the FACE Act. He was surrounded, as you can see, by supporters as he left the courthouse. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett is live in our D.C. newsroom. And Avajoy, we saw him walk out. Didn't get to hear it. What did he say?
Hey there, Del. Well, Don Lemon, as you mentioned, he pleaded not guilty after that arraignment earlier today in Minnesota. And he was very outspoken about what's been happening to him. He mentioned that he has been a journalist for years, and the First Amendment continues to protect him even to this day as he continues to work as a journalist. We also know that he's been extremely outspoken against the current administration. So take a listen to what else he had to say about that.
People are finally realizing what this administration is all about. The process is the punishment with them. And like all of you here in Minnesota, the great people of Minnesota, I will not be intimidated. I will not back down. I will fight these baseless charges, and I will not be silenced.
So here is a reminder of the backstory. Last month, Don Lemon entered a church in Minnesota as he was following protesters who went into that church to speak out against the leader of that church, who also happened to be an ICE official. And Lemon said he was following these people, covering them as he would as being just a journalist. We also know that he was arrested and faced charges sometime thereafter. He wasn't the only journalist who faced charges. There was another independent journalist by the name of Georgia Fort who also faced charges, along with some community activists as well. And this is an issue that the administration has been very vocal about. They posted on the official White House page when Don Lemon was arrested. And this is a topic that came up on Capitol Hill earlier this week when there was an exchange between Republican Jim Jordan and the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi. Take a listen to what they had to say.
You have a right to protest on the street, but that doesn't give you a right to go into the Capitol and disrupt Congress. Something these guys talk about every day. You can't do that. So when Don Lemon said that he was exercising his First Amendment free press rights, freedom of the press rights, that's not really accurate because he was trampling on other individuals' rights. Is that true?
Chairman, we will always protect our churches and the freedom of religion. And yes, that's accurate.
Now, Lemon and those other folks who were charged in this indictment, they've been accused of intimidating those churchgoers. I have been able to speak with First Amendment scholars, along with journalism scholars, journalism ethics scholars, and they have told me that the First Amendment continues to protect journalists. It doesn't matter if you work for a major organization or if you are an independent journalist like Don Lemon. There are some exceptions, though. For example, if you're someone who organizes a protest and enters a church and then you're asked to leave and then you don't, that could be considered trespassing, and you're therefore more vulnerable to face some charges and maybe even being convicted. But as you guys know, this is just the start of everything. Today was just the arraignment where Don Lemon and others went into court. They pleaded not guilty. Some other folks will be going into court next week as well as a part of this same case, and they will have their day in court to plead guilty or not guilty. And then comes the rest of the case. Will there be a trial? Will there be some sort of settlement in this matter? We just have to wait to see how it all plays out. But yet another high-profile case coming out of the state of Minnesota, Dell.
Yeah, always important to point out that the protesters said they were there because they believed that there was a high-ranking local ICE official who acted as a pastor inside that church. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett for us live in D.C. Avajoy, thank you very much.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
Have FBI agents been to your house? You've talked to them? Yep. Yeah. What have they asked you?
To surveil our backyard or property and our cameras, see if there's anything. We don't have anything on our cameras.
Nothing came up.
Thanks for joining us again on Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
The FBI has now doubled its reward for information that might help them find Nancy Guthrie or arrest or convict those involved in her disappearance. It was $50,000, now it's $100,000. Investigators also releasing the first physical description of the male suspect in this case. Nick Saletti from our Scripps News Group is on the scene in Pima County, Arizona. And Nick, tell us about the suspect description that they just released.
Yeah, Dal, we're learning some brand new details here. We're hearing that he's 5'9", 5'10", average build, and at the time was also carrying a backpack just like this. I purchased it at a Walmart here, exclusive to Walmart here, the brand Ozark Trail. That's what the FBI is saying. Also, we're getting some brand new information about the gloves that Pima County Sheriff said were found in this area. The update we're just getting from ABC News is that DNA was recovered from at least some of these gloves, and it's now being compared to associates of the Guthries. And again, that's what they're saying from ABC News. Associates of the Guthries is what the DNA comparison is. In the meantime, I have to tell you, for neighbors here in this community, they are not only fearful, but they are absolutely heartbroken over what has happened here, just wanting answers. And that's perhaps the hardest part for all of them, is that wait to find out what exactly happened to 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie.
Nick, as you're on the ground there, you've been speaking with friends and neighbors of Nancy Guthrie, a woman whose name we know, but we really don't know that much about her. What are they telling you?
Right. You know, this is a community where they told me, even if you don't know someone super well, even if you weren't best friends, let's say, you always stop and say hi and you wave. And even though the homes here sit pretty far apart, I would still say it is definitely a tight community. As the days have gone on, we've seen that show of support at Nancy's driveway with all the flowers and the prayer candles and the crosses and the messages of hope. All of that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I think that speaks to something bigger here in this community, because Nancy is one of their own here in Tucson, here in the Catalina foothills specifically. And the fact that something happened to her, in so many ways, I think it feels like it happened to them, a member of their family. And I think that that just adds to more of the sorrow here and the heartache, not the least of which being experienced by the Guthrie family themselves.
Have FBI agents been to your house? You've talked to them?
Yep.
Yeah? What have they asked you?
To surveil our backyard or property and our cameras, see if there's anything. We don't have anything on our cameras.
Nothing came up.
Were they in your backyard trying to see if they could find anything?
Yeah, yeah.
About how long were they there for?
We chatted about a good 10 minutes, and they were back there like another 10 minutes.
Yeah, so, you know, we've been reporting, too, that the FBI has been canvassing this neighborhood as well as Pima County deputies. So we talked to that gentleman. His name is Roy. He said that the FBI has already been at his property this week. And Pima County deputies also putting out that all call to everyone within a 2-mile radius of Nancy Guthrie's home to try to see if they have any surveillance video and maybe reveal some clue that right now investigators still don't have themselves.
Nick, I'm curious, the mood on the ground where you are. There is all this new information coming out, the gloves, upping the reward, the videotape. Does that lead more to a sense of optimism that she might be found versus the fact that we are now almost approaching 2 weeks that she's been missing?
Yeah, Del, I think it's the latter. I have a source here, a law enforcement source in southern Arizona, and he tells me he's shocked that this case hasn't been solved yet. And I think that for regular community folks, too, it's the same thing. They almost feel like, what's going on? Why don't we have any answers yet? Where is she? Is Nancy still alive? There is a deep sense of frustration, some even feeling like law enforcement maybe isn't doing enough to get her back.
Nick Saletti with our Scripps News Group on the scene for us in Pima County, Arizona. Nick, thank you very much.
Coming up on Today's It Happened, from Attorney General Pam Bondi's explosive House hearing over the Epstein files to Senator Mark Kelly's win over the Defense Department, it was yet another busy week in politics. Stay with us for my weekly chat with journalist Maritza Giorgio about all things within the Beltway. That's after the break. Partial government shutdown is about to hit the Department of Homeland Security. The debate centers around funding for Immigration and Customs enforcement, but a shutdown would mean tens of thousands of employees with TSA, FEMA, and the Coast Guard could miss upcoming paychecks. Maritza Giorgio joining me now this morning from Missoula, Montana, and it has certainly not been a slow week in politics. So I want to start with that shutdown news. Do you think we've got any chance of a deal before that midnight deadline tonight?
I'll do my best Nate Reed impression here, Steph. No. Okay, I'll expand on that. I don't think so. First of all, we have a whole delegation of senators that left for Munich yesterday to go to the Munich Security Conference. So they're literally out of the country. Meanwhile, we have a lot of gap here, a lot of divide over these sticking points the Democrats say they need in order to pass this funding bill for the for DHS. So one of those things is demands for body cameras on DHS agents who are handling these immigration crackdowns. They want warrant requirements for home entries, and they want to prohibit those agents from wearing masks when they're conducting those operations. Now, Senator John Fetterman was pretty vocal about this, saying that, hey, ICE and Border Patrol, they have their funding from the big, beautiful bill. Shutting down the other agencies within DHS does nothing to stop those. But I think at this point, the Democrats see this as their only leverage. So we will see if some kind of 11th hour miracle takes place. But if it does, then we need to call back all of those lawmakers, many of whom are overseas at this Munich Security Conference. Senator John Thune, the majority leader in the Senate, says, hey, he can do that, and they're ready and waiting on standby. But I don't think we will see any kind of massive negotiation breakthrough by the end of the day.
Yeah, a deal certainly seems unlikely. So if we're facing a DHS shutdown, the question will now become how long might that shutdown last? And of course, that's the magic question that nobody has the answer to just yet. I want to ask you about a hearing we had earlier this week with Attorney General Pam Bondi in some really fiery exchanges with lawmakers on Capitol Hill. I want to play a quick portion of that.
Was the president aware of Secretary Lutnick's ties to Epstein when he chose him to lead the Department of Commerce? Was he aware?
Chris Malin was a Border Patrol agent.
Okay, so I'm going to conclude that the president, in fact, did know about his ties because he was the next door neighbor.
Shame on you.
Oh, for goodness sakes,
You're
this
from
is
a tiny,
pathetic.
beautiful
This is
state.
pathetic, Mr.
Committee
Chair.
will be in order.
I am not asking trick questions here. The
You got your
American
5
people
minutes.
have a right to know the answers to this. These are senior officials in the Trump administration. This is not a game, Secretary.
I'm Attorney General.
My apologies, I couldn't tell.
Well, what was your take on that hearing, Maritza? Was anything accomplished really from Democrats or Republicans in that hearing?
I don't think so, Steph. My take initially, I was supposed to go out and do some errands that day, and I ended up being glued to my TV all morning because I couldn't believe that hearing. It was just shocking, and each moment kind of more salacious than the last. And that was just one clip. And there were several. I mean, you could have played literally one of 10 clips that I have running through my mind from that hearing, just shouting matches. And you know, I spoke to one former senator about this and said, what's your takeaway? And they said, hey, I think this was just a complete waste of time, because whenever a Democrat asked the Attorney General a question, she was ready with her quote unquote burn book, ready for the insults on them instead of actually listening to the questions. It was different when the Republican members asked her, except for maybe Thomas Massey. But, you know, we also saw at one point another representative call her Jekyll and Hyde, depending on if she was talking to a Democrat or a Republican. And then we saw that photograph of her actual burn book, and it showed basically a search history of Representative Jayapal and what she had searched within the Epstein files. That actually, this might be something accomplished, because that actually prompted House Speaker Mike Johnson to come out and really kind of distance himself from the administration, something he doesn't often do, in saying that the DOJ should not be tracking those searches. So it was fiery. It certainly took up a lot of the airwaves. But does it, at the end of the day, give justice to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein? No, it does not. Does it add any clarity as to what is happening within the Epstein files and these investigations? No, it does not. And I think at the end of the day, you have to remember the victims here.
Yeah, fiery hearings on Capitol Hill certainly happen, and I've found, you know, those fiery exchanges usually don't reveal a whole lot, which is, of course, what the American public is probably looking for in most of these cases. So another big case to ask you about: federal judge blocking the Pentagon, blocking the Department of Defense from punishing Senator Mark Kelly over that video urging reminding military members that they are allowed to refuse illegal orders. We also had prosecutors failing to indict Senator Kelly and the other Democratic lawmakers that he appeared with in that video. So let's start with the first the first decision with the court ruling blocking DOD from changing his status. What do you take from that?
Well, I think it's fascinating. This judge is a judge who was appointed by George W. Bush, a Republican appointee. He wrote a 29-page opinion on this stuff, and this is just a temporary order. This just blocks Secretary Hegseth from basically punishing Senator Kelly for temporarily until this goes through the full court process here. But he basically said that Pete Hegseth's attempts to punish or discipline Mark Kelly through the military channels violates his First Amendment rights. And this judge used several exclamation points throughout this ruling. Now, Hegseth, of course, says they are going to appeal. He posted an article and he quoted Captain with quotation marks, kind of saying sedition is sedition, Captain, really, poking the bear a little bit more with Senator Kelly. But I think that between that and the other case that you mentioned, with the grand jury not finding a reason to indict all the 6 lawmakers, I think these are considered big wins for those lawmakers. And they say this is just the first round. They're anticipating many more fights, but that they're going to notch this as a win.
So I want to go a bit more into that grand jury decision, choosing not to indict all of these sitting Democratic lawmakers. The saying in legal circles is you can indict a ham sandwich, but in this case, a ham sandwich was not indicted. So what is your takeaway from that decision and what that means for other efforts from the Department of Justice to try to go after perceived political enemies of the president and his administration?
Well, they don't really have a great track record when you think about it. I mean, they secured indictments against former FBI Director James Comey, Letitia James, but those were dropped. Not to mention the person in Washington, D.C. who literally used a sandwich to attack an officer, and they failed to secure an indictment on that. So yes, you can indict a ham sandwich, but I think that this is just the latest in a series of losses for this Department of Justice. But as we know, this whole administration, as was laid out by Trump advisor Steve Bannon at the very beginning, they have a strategy, and that is to flood the zone. And so this is not going to be the last of these attempts. I think that they will just continue to try to indict and prosecute where they see fit. And again, this is a temporary order. If we go back to Mark Kelly, this is a temporary order from a judge as this plays out through the court system. And it gets a little bit fuzzy there because we also have a different process for military courts. So the judge ruled in Kelly's favor here and tried to basically shield him from that military court process. But we'll see if that becomes a permanent decision. But yes, I think that these were not considered wins for the Trump administration this week, neither of those cases. But those 6 lawmakers, I mean, the president really took aim at them and at one point shared posts that called for them to be, hanged and that they were treasonous. So I don't think this is the end of attempts to try to punish them. And, it's also important to note these court processes, this whole the lead up to these decisions, that process is painful. And so that's probably part of the goal here, is to inflict pain both with time and money being thrown at legal efforts to try to fight these attempts.
This is Maritza Giorgio, host of the podcast Grounded. Thank you so much for joining me this week. And of course, you can find your podcast on Blue Sky, Substack, Instagram, YouTube, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for spending part of your evening with Today As It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. Have a wonderful Friday night and a great weekend.